Hello, and welcome to this demo on types of selectors. Now that we have some experience with selectors, we can dive deeper by exploring selector types. Specifically, we will focus on the distinction between full and partial selectors. So what's the difference? Full selectors contain all the information required to identify a specific UI element, including the top-level window. They are not limited to container activities and can be used in any activity within an automation workflow. On the other hand, partial selectors are specific to container activities, such as use application or browser activity. These container activities store information related to the top-level window, and the activities within them use partial selectors. Partial selectors do not include the information about the top-level window. In the classic design experience, full selectors are more commonly used across all activities. However, in modern design, the child activities within container activities use partial selectors, which store only the necessary information for identifying the UI elements within the container. Let's take a look at an example for each type. We'll open Studio and create a new project. Let's first see how a full selector appears. To clarify, the default experience we're working with is the modern design experience. However, for demonstration purposes, we will also be utilizing the classic click activity. To access classic activities, we can filter the activities by selecting the classic option. Let's search for the click activity and choose the classic one from the list. Next, we will indicate the Submit button on the RPA challenge page. Now, let's examine the captured selector either by opening the Selector Editor or using the UI Explorer. Now, let's open the Selector Editor window. Inside the generated selector, the first line identifies the application, indicating that this is a full selector. The subsequent lines are used to pinpoint the specific element within the application window. By taking a closer look, we can see that it includes important details about the top-level window, such as the application being used, Microsoft Edge, and the title of the page, for example, RPA Challenge. Furthermore, it provides specific information about the element itself, such as its type, input, and the value it holds, Submit. This selector ensures accurate identification of the desired element, making it a full selector. Next, let's explore a full selector with modern activities. As we are aware, when using modern activities, it's necessary to include the container activity. Let's add the Use Application Browser activity. Now, let's indicate the RPA challenge page. The selector generated from the container activity will be a full selector. When we take a closer look at the generated selector within this container activity, we notice that it only stores information about the top-level window. It doesn't include the specific details of the element itself. However, because it contains the essential top node information, we can confidently say that it's a full selector. Next, let's generate a partial selector to observe the distinctions between them. As previously mentioned, child activities within the container activity identify the necessary UI element using partial selectors. To witness this, let's add a modern design click activity inside the Do section of the container activity. Here, in this specific scenario, we observe that the selector for the click activity is a partial selector, specifically targeting the bottom nodes. The top node of the selector is inherited from the container activity. This information is derived from the fuzzy selector property. Moreover, we can also examine the strict selector that is generated, which will similarly be partial in nature. When using only a partial selector, the robot cannot accurately identify the UI element. This is because the partial selector lacks the necessary information. However, by combining the top-level information from the container activity with the specific element details from the child activity, a full selector is created. This comprehensive selector provides the complete information needed to precisely identify and interact with the UI element within the application. Let's see an example of a partial selector by adding another modern activity. And indicate the last name input field. Let's check out the generated selector. As we can see, the top node is grayed out. As mentioned earlier, it is inherited from the container activity. Only the second line represents the selector generated by this activity, which is a partial selector as it contains details specific to the UI element. With this, we have reached the end of this demo. For a quick recap, full selectors contain all the information required to identify a specific UI element. Partial selectors are enclosed in containers, which store the information related to the top-level window. Here is a challenge for you. What type of selector is generated by the app Web Recorder? Thank you for watching, and happy automation!